So introducing myself, I'm Dr. Julien Pollack. I am an associate professor at the School of Project Management and in the John Grill Center for Project Leadership. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of information to cover. We have 6 presentations, each of 10 minutes. So I'm not going to take up any time at the start. I'm instead going to let us leap straight into our first presentation, which is by Dr. Paolo Stracchi from the University of Sydney, looking at constructing the Sydney Opera House on a 50-year anniversary. So, Paolo, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Julien. Hi, everyone. Morning, everyone. My name is Paolo Stracchi. I'm a senior lecturer in architectural technology at the University of Sydney. And today I'm delighted to share a super quick overview of our 3-year research into the construction of the iconic Sydney Opera House, which is currently, as we all know, if you're in Sydney, celebrating its 50 years anniversary. Slide. Yeah, this research project began in 2020 in collaboration with colleagues from the UNSW and the APFL in Lausanne, with who I embarked on a comprehensive study to understand the Australian contribution made by the Australian general contractor Hornibrook to the design and construction of the famous sail-like roof. We dived into you can come back. Yeah, we dive into an extensive array, a terrific array of archival materials, including over 5,000 newly discovered shop drawings, original technical reports, and weekly site minutes. These documents all together allowed us for the very, very first time to reconstruct the technical, procedural, and organizational challenges that characterize the construction of the Sydney Opera House, a site that can be seen as a very first example of construction complexity, a complexity that arose from the non-standard design requirements, and that led to the need for creative and innovative construction solutions that were very, very crucial for producing first and then assembly the many pieces that make up the structure of the Sydney Opera House. Perhaps even more crucially, the sails weren't just a complicated, if you like, intricate structure made up of many, many different pieces and parts that to fit together. But this process somehow showed us that those roofs, to make those roofs required a well-coordinated effort, both intellectually and, of course, professionally. Slide. So our research revealed a super high degree of integration, particularly in the roles and workflows between two critical players, Arup, the structural engineering firm, and Hornibrook, the Australian contractor. And this project may be one of the very first consciously to adopt what we today refer to as integrated design, a practice that resulted in a pioneering use of cost-plus contract in New South Wales. So the cost-plus contract was actually used probably for the very first time for the construction of the Sydney Opera House. Slide. During this research, we also started to trace, how the knowledge transfer from the general contractor expertise and developing different buildings to the Sydney Opera House construction. And in fact, we found somehow that Hornibrook expertise was actually developed in bridge construction, and that the very particular knowledge was eventually transferred in the construction and somehow shaped the construction of the Sydney Opera House. This was especially evident in their past work on the Commonwealth Avenue Bridge in Canberra, which served basically as a prototype for the construction of the Sydney Opera House. Slide. So this was a very brief introduction to the research. If you are more curious about the research, there will be a public event on the 7th of December at the Museum of Sydney. This presentation is a special part, of course, of the Sydney Opera House 50 years anniversary celebration. And there will be also a panel discussion with Jennifer White, another special guest, and even a virtual reality experience that will take you through the through the original construction site of the Sydney Opera House. If you're interested, but you can make it to the event or you are not in Sydney, there is a link available, I think, in the chat with our publications about this research and some simulations for you to explore. Yeah, thank you very much.
Paolo, I've got to applaud you for being so efficient and staying to time. Thank you very much. If everyone is so efficient, we might have a little bit of time for questions at the end, so feel free to put things in the Q&A. At this point, I would like to hand over to our next keynote in brief from Dr. Neda Madi from Georgia Tech, who will be talking about digital twins in projects. Neda, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Julien. I'm going to talk about the scalability of sort of this digital twin projects and more in terms of the fast and slow dynamics that occur when we deal with these projects. Next slide. Digital twins, in terms of scaling, hold a very significant dimension, because as we work to optimize our digital twin project across various domains, we deal with a change processing that occur at different paces. I'm going to reference Daniel Kahneman's Nobel Prize winning Thinking Fast and Slow, which explores the two primary modes of human cognition, which is system one, which is more of a fast intuitive thinking and automatic thinking, and system two, which is more of a slow, deliberate and analytical thinking. The connection between this theory and digital twins for me is fascinating, because if our digital twins are to mimic the reality in the real world and help us with our decision making, they have to be able to correctly replicate the reality and the different paces of phenomena, that change processes that are happening. So change processes unfold at various paces in the real world, some of them rapid, some of them are slow, some need immediate response, some unfold over time, and the diversity in the pace of change that exists is fundamental in order to characterize those real world systems. For example, if we think about disaster events, urban systems in response to different types of disaster will act differently. If it's an earthquake, it will be very fast. It will be in a matter of seconds. A tornado takes a little longer, tsunami longer, and so on. Drought, it takes a matter of decades to take place, and so is the change processes that happen in our infrastructure. Our urban systems also, just like the disaster events, are subject to normal day-to-day, but also different change processing. For example, a city of infrastructures are interconnected. On one hand, we will witness slow incremental changes, like construction of a long-term infrastructure project, or we deal with more of a dynamic, fast fluctuations, such as daily traffic that we have to deal with, and consider mobility trends and continuously influence the changes that take place into our models. So our models need to stay updated and responsive to ensure that they capture the essence of both speed and gradual shift and the interplay between the two. Next slide. So I'm going to introduce one of the projects that I'm particularly work on right now. This is for responding to a river infrastructure system, the Chattahoochee River, which is situated in the state of at the border of state of Georgia and Alabama, about 2 hours from Georgia Tech. And we are working with the government to develop this digital twin of this segment of the river for them. That's very significant, and it holds a distinction of being the longest man-made urban whitewater rafting course in the United States. And the river is very popular in terms of recreation, so they don't want to shut it down, but also it's a very complex hydrologically, and it requires careful monitoring and intense it receives intense rainfall events, and water from far away, from up to 150 miles away from a lake upstream, and multiple dams come to this river. So it's very challenging, and it presents a lot of safety concerns. It has some sort of hydrological dynamics that includes frequent flooding events, and it are coming from both scheduled, unscheduled water release from upstream dams, seasonal rainfalls, and the river water level will rise. And as you see in the pictures, in a normal, nice and calm day, there's a walk, river walk next to those islands that you see are out. But then the water level rises up to, if you could see the light posts, they're all submerged under the water, and people are free to cautiously use the water and enjoy it, but they have the risk of multiple cases of inundation and drowning and rescue events. And the event, they also have a temporal constraint in terms of responding, because the event of flooding happens, a limited window exists for execution of a safe evacuation procedure. And usually people are tourists, so they're unaware of the environment. So the time constraint is also presents a challenge for them. Next slide, please. In terms of creating this digital twin, we created the river infrastructure digital twin with the purpose of capturing the interaction of humans with the system. So humans, as they use the water infrastructure, and combine it with real-time insights and hopefully long-term trends that would enable them to comprehensively analyze the whole infrastructure system. And our approach was to address human safety, and the digital twin framework you'll see on the right has 4 segments. The first one was leveraging computer vision techniques to incorporate image processing and object detection. And at its core, we're using this object detection library that will enable precise and real-time localizations of people in the water, whether or not they're on the safe islands in a boat or on an about to be submerged island. And that's based on predictions of water level rise that will do in addition, based on the water level sensors that we have placed. And then we have a camera placed at the bridge, looking at that segment of the river to gather camera feed for the data and the digital images that we extract to improve the quality of our detection. And then water level detection will let us know how likely and how fast a water level rise is supposed to happen. And then we would do like a submerging prediction, which the elements of the real-time data will help us identify which islands are likely to be submerged or are at risk, or the people that are being detected are at risk. So it's all about fast processes and fast response at this point, including that the risk of submersion will help us with emergency planning and response with the response team. And then lastly, we produce a disaster alert, which will help the rescue team or emergency response team to receive those alerts and sort of create a situation of awareness for them. And it could be relevant to authorities and emergency services and the public for general information and facilitating a timely response and awareness. And next slide. And so this mimics the situation that you'll see there. There's a digital twin version of the river up on the right, and this is the camera view of that segment of the river I mentioned. So we're capturing, detecting the humans and their activities, whether it's in the boat or a human is just in the water, and we'll know on the side from the digital twin that whether or not the water level is rising in a dangerous level. So we will capture those and we'll incorporate the alert system. So we will capture both fast dynamics that will help with emergency response during unexpected events, and also sort of like a real-time monitoring and situational awareness. But also this helps with more of a slow dynamics like planning and decision makings, because it gives us an understanding of how humans in general over time interact with the system. What kind of activities do they take place? What times? Where? What are the risky areas, hotspots? And on top of that, it helps with community engagement in the long term and strategic decisions, where it will engage the community for decisions related to the river and interventions and deliberate processes that are going to be helpful with the community and impact the safe changes that will happen within the infrastructure and at the intersection of human and infrastructure interactions. So in conclusion, it is important to recognize that while the integration of fast and slow in these digital twin projects hold great promise, it's not always that easy. I gave you a brief overview, but there are many capabilities that are ambitious and are not entirely achievable with the technology that we have developed humans up until now. But the digital twin development is ongoing, and significant possibilities are on the horizon, and full realization of those. Some of them include model synthesis and capturing heterogeneous data and frequencies into our model and improving them. Some of them are leveraging online learning or nacasting possibilities and improving our computational models in the different dimensions of temporal and frequency dimensions. And more recently, we are able to use large language models and NLP interfaces to hopefully improve them. And with that, I'll pause, and next slide, you can quickly grab my information and email me if you need to discuss anything or ask any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Neda. That was really interesting. I've certainly got a couple of questions for you, so maybe if we have time at the end, I'd like to follow up. I thought the application of different decision-making styles to responsiveness in digital twins was really interesting. But now I would like to pass over to Dr. Natalie Smith from our John Grill Institute for Project Leadership, who'll be talking about project governance in digital health. Over to you, Natalie.
Thanks, Julien. And there's some hard acts to follow, some really interesting research with very practical applications. But I look forward to sharing this with you. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll just give you a little bit of context for the research that I did to look at digital transformations and the role of boards and executives in those digital transformations. So I was in the context of Queensland government rolling out digital health, hundreds of millions of dollars, transforming the whole health system, touching over 60,000 employees, the communities they serve, large complex projects. And in the Queensland context particularly, but it's not unique to Queensland, some long shadows cast by some very poor transformation and digital projects. And we call it the Queensland Health Payroll debacle rather than project, but it's, in case studies of some of the worst projects ever. Was meant to be $40 or $50 million, $1.2 billion was the last count, and still going. So my experience had been in industry, working with Queensland Health, trying to improve their project delivery capability. But increasingly, I was seeing that it didn't matter how good your project management tools, your organisational change methods were, the role of the board and executive were critical. Yet I couldn't see much to guide boards and executives on what they should be doing. And in fact, some of the mantra that we give to boards is noses in, fingers out. So what should boards and executives be doing in these large transformational projects? Next slide, please. So that was my research question. Because I had come from industry and trying to, learn how to be a researcher, I used a form of engaged scholarship and action research. And just quickly, and I think importantly, because of the nature, it was an industry problem. And an industry question I was trying to solve. The sample involved data that I was collecting from the field, what we knew from research and literature, but also the experience of the participants and also my own experience. I'm not trying to pretend that didn't exist, but to bring that to the research. Then the research process itself was an iterative process of collecting data, analysing it, and then evaluating it and keeping going around that circle. I had the rare opportunity to follow a digital health transformation, which gave the rare opportunity was being able to compare the role of boards and executives when you had the same transformation, the same technology, the same central project team, the same funders, the same business case. The main difference being the boards and executives, different corporate governance structures in the health services where it was being implemented. Because my background had also involved experience outside health, and I knew that the likes of financial services had been digitally transforming for many years and indeed decades before health, I also consulted and involved other industry and transformation types to see if we could learn from them and apply that to the health context. And you'll see from that table quite a large participant group, just over 136 different transformation projects were part of the data collection. So what did I find? If we could move to the next slide, please. So what I found was that there was a surprising similarity in accounts between successful and unsuccessful projects. And so I was asking board members and mostly CEOs, but also others in the executive team, to compare their role in successful and unsuccessful transformations. And even though I was looking at a very diverse sample, I found surprising similarities in their accounts. And yeah, so there were 4 different groupings of activities that board members and executives were doing in successful transformations. And it was almost the antithesis of those in unsuccessful transformations. And I'll touch on those briefly, but the other surprise to me was that when I asked, one of the last questions is, what would you do differently? Many commented that they realised in retrospect, and some indeed had been able to go faster, that they could have gone faster with their digital transformation. And that was curious because I think, as we've talked about in some of the other discussions today, transformations often will mostly go over the time allocation. And we think change takes longer, the community consultation, etc. And certainly in the health context, that is the case. So this notion of going faster was curious, which led me to conceptualise the notion of transformation friction, and that, which I defined to be the forces at play between the existing organisation and the transformation type, and that the role of the board and executives was to pay attention to and be intentional about reducing those transformation frictions. And so just quickly, the 4 areas that for boards and executives to focus on. The first is having a pride-inducing purpose in change. So financial transformation, not very exciting to people. The more you could inspire people, give them pride in what it was that the organisation was transforming to, the better and faster change could go. The second, unifying leadership. So the more aligned your executive team are, the relationship between the board and the executive through to external partners, which I heard reflected in our first presentation this morning. Again, the better and faster change should go. The bigger half for me as a practitioner was realising the inherent paradoxes associated with transformation. So, for example, what needs to stay the same, what needs to change, the resources you've got, the resources you need, the need to fly the plane and fix it at the same time. But then realising there are a number of levers that you have as a board and executive to navigate those paradoxes. And then finally, what we call dialogical adapting, but to do with, I guess you start with pride, but you end up with humility. So a posture of listening beyond what's being presented in the boardroom to what's happening at the front line and adapting course accordingly. So they're the 4 in terms of the contribution and the implications, I guess, for digital health projects and governance. I did find they are higher friction. I think digital's higher friction than a non-digital project, and there are reasons I can explain after for that. And I think the health context is a particularly high friction environment. But I do think using these principles, there are ways of reducing friction. I also think, and we talked in one of the earlier presentations, about how research and practitioners can combine. So I think there's also some methodological contributions from this research. But yeah, that's what I wanted to share today, and look forward to your questions, and reach out to me if you'd like to know more. Thanks, Julien.
Oh, thank you, Natalie. I've talked to you about the role of boards in delivery before, and I always enjoy the opportunity. So thank you for going into this in more depth. I always feel like I learn a lot when I get the chance to talk to you about this. I was particularly interested in the movement from pride to humility and the way board members were engaging. I'll follow you up on that at another time. But I would like to move on now to our next presentation, our fourth in our row of 6. This is Professor Žiga Turk from the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia. We'll be talking about AI in Construction 4.0. Žiga, over to you.
Thank you, Julien. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to briefly put in context what the role of artificial intelligence is in Construction 4.0. Now, Construction 4.0 is a kind of Industry 4.0, and it's an umbrella approach that we in Europe see as the next phase in technological development, in technological revolution. And the essence is not just more digital, more computers, etc., etc. The key principle in Industry 4.0 and in Construction 4.0 is that these two worlds, the digital one you see on the left-hand side and the material one that you see on the right-hand side, are not interfaced, are not connected by people, they are connected together automatically. In our kind of 3.0 world, well, we design something and then we go with that design to the construction site, we look at the design and then make changes in the real world. And the other way, of course, around, we observe the real world and then enter a few things about that real world into the computer world. This is supposed to merge. This is supposed to be connected without human interface. And if it is connected without human interface, there are several technologies that are needed to support that. Next slide, please. This includes Internet of People, Internet of Things, platforms, digital twins. We had a great presentation a few minutes ago on that. Robotization, but most importantly, cognitive computing. Simply, there will be too much data to be managed by man-made algorithms. There is a need for machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc. Next slide, please. Problems that require intelligence, actually all problems that require computerized support, can be split into analytic and generative problems. The analytic ones are kind of easier, and we have seen them tackled by both AI and traditional algorithmic programming for a long time. So you have a lot of information, and out of that information, you want to create some analysis. Like you have the structure defined, and you do structural analysis about the stresses, etc., etc. Or you have a building and you compute the building physics. The generative problems have been tougher. Usually, as humans, we're generating new ideas, we're creating new designs. But this is changing, and we have various tools to do that. Next slide. In these generative tasks, again, very much echoing what Neda was saying, there are kind of two ways in which we are approaching them. I would call one intuitive, experiential, and the other one theoretical. Here on the slide, you have Luka Doncic, a famous basketball player. He does not know much about the physics of throwing a ball to the basket, yet he scores. Usually he scores for 3 points. And in a similar way, when ancient masters like Brunelleschi and the others were designing cathedrals, they did not have the science of structural mechanics, yet they have built stuff that is still holding. On the other hand, today we teach students formulas, abstractions, logic, mathematics, and they can do stuff. And both in these both two ways, also artificial intelligence works. Next slide, please. This is an example where we are using the what could be called the slow or the abstract or the theoretical approach to using artificial intelligence. Here you see a building that needs some shading system. This shading system can be done in many different ways. There are many parameters how to optimize how much light will get into the building, but also how much sun energy will heat the building up. And you can use a strategy called generate and test. So the computer is generating alternatives, testing them, and you're able to select the best one. We can also deploy modern generative artificial intelligence, like language models, to create kind of first drafts. But then, of course, that kind of intelligence is not good enough, not sufficiently proficient to do a design that would hold in an engineering way. Next slide. A similar approach we are using when designing a structure to house a telescope. This is a collaboration that a PhD student of ours is doing together with University of Liverpool. Again, computers are very good at generating alternatives, analyzing that alternatives, and selecting the best one. But this is not what has been fashionable lately. Fashionable was generative AI that was able to create pictures, that was able to create essays, texts, etc., etc. Next slide. And we are seeing startups that are trying to do that with architecture and engineering, like you would get an architectural draft of a building, just like you get a draft of some text when you're writing an essay. The problem is that it's much more difficult to design buildings. It's even more difficult to do engineering design of stuff than it is possible to simply, continue some pattern that you have put into ChatGPT. Next slide. But they are very good examples, and I think this will be the future of kind of combining the rational, the symbolic, the theoretical approaches with things that can be done with language models, like this Sophistic partner with us in a couple of EU projects. Sophistic is doing combining text prompts with creating and automatically generating models for computation. Next slide. If one picture I would like to keep you up with to understand the limitations of large language models and ChatGPT and all of that. All these models operate on a kind of symbolic level. They are able to fake with communication, with words and pictures, the tips of the icebergs. Yet, when we humans deal with things, we also have very deep, this is the lower part of the iceberg, we have very deep ideas and theories about things. And we as icebergs float in the real world. None of that is available to the generative AI that is so fashionable today. It operates on the tip of the iceberg level, while us humans have deeper and theoretical insights, and we are embedded in the real world. To close up with the takeaways, next slide. Sorry for that. Construction 4.0 is about connecting the physical and the digital. Humans cannot do it alone. The AI is needed. Engineering is much harder than writing poems, essays, and reports. It's grounded in theoretical knowledge, abstractions, and reductions. The currently fashionable large language-based technology does not have all that. It gives an impression of understanding, while there is nothing below the surface of it. Engineering and architecture will remain largely human-driven. However, sub-processes will be assisted by AI, either by intuitive AI, continuing some patterns that we gave as a prompt, or with generate and test strategy, which is well established. AI will kill jobs, particularly where AI will not be used. But not all jobs, intuition experience is not understanding. Thank you.
Žiga, thank you. That was a lot of content covered in a short space of time, and I'm still catching up. But it was fascinating seeing the way that AI is being applied in the design process. So I imagine we will have some questions to cover to explore that further when we come towards the end of this session. Next, I would like to pass to Dr. Lara Mottee from the John Grill Institute for Project Leadership. And Lara will be talking about the Sydney Megaproject Ecology. Lara, over to you.
Thanks, Julien. My name's Lara Mottee. I work in the Institute with Professor Jennifer White and Ali Ashrangi on this research, as a researcher on this project. I actually have a background in environmental planning, consulting for infrastructure projects. So I bring quite a cross-disciplinary perspective to the research that we do. And I really want to set the scene for you. Cast your mind back to before the pandemic in 2018. This is what Sydney was like. Our infrastructure wasn't coping with our needs and hadn't been for many years. And our population had doubled in the previous 30 years, and it was set to do the same in the next 20. And while there'd been significant federal infrastructure commitment committed to back in the 2000s, it was going to take some significant planning skills to realise the infrastructure that our cities needed. And it was also going to take some significantly big projects with potentially some significantly big impacts. And so the era of the infrastructure mega project began. Next slide, please. So why Megaproject Ecology? So project managers and previous scholarship had tended to focus on the project as the unit of analysis, but project leaders addressing a changing world had the opportunity to look up from the individual project to see a project in context, in ecosystems or ecologies. A megaproject is a way of understanding how knowledge is shared between different projects at different scales and social layers. And we wanted to investigate how lessons from previous projects are shared with new megaprojects in the ecology, and then to understand the potential for standardisation, innovation and learning across projects in addressing grand challenges. So we've adopted a historical approach, bounding our study to infrastructure megaprojects across the last 20 years, and with consideration of the dynamic pipeline of upcoming projects that are set by government. And so far, we've undertaken secondary analysis of publicly available data about those projects. And we've also conducted about 35 semi-structured interviews over the past year. And right now, we're in the midst of analysing the data, and we're really starting to see some very exciting findings, which I'm going to share with you now. So looking more closely at that structure of the ecology, we notice there's a lot of people movement between firms and governments and from other cities and from international locations. And we noticed that movement tended to fill the gaps of knowledge deleted to deliver these complex mega projects. Our participants identified both informal and formal practices for sharing lessons, and many of our participants said that informal activities are more effective for sharing and receiving knowledge, such as the activities of Engineers Australia, like professional associations that bring people together at networking events and seminars. And this, many participants said, felt was because these informal opportunities allowed them to share more openly without contractual pressures or risks. Now, between governments, there seemed to be a transparency and openness and willingness to share across borders in terms of leadership or procurement models, or to address a specific task or a specific issue like health and safety on construction sites during the COVID pandemic. Now, within international firms and organisations or construction firms, consultancies, we saw significant efforts to share lessons internally through project handover, startup meetings, peer-to-peer mentoring, project databases throughout the project lifecycle. And what these initial findings are starting to tell us is about relational and physical organisational space for collaborative practices and how that they're formed, and how projects are interrelated between projects, firms, ties, localities, and the crucial role of time in this formation. Next slide. So what does that mean for practice, and what is our data telling us about recommendations for industry and government? Well, associated with this big planned pipeline of infrastructure in our cities, we've seen this real growth in the complexity and size of projects in Australia. And of course, the need to upskill quickly across all sectors, which we've been talking about today, so particularly in the energy and transport sectors. And organisations of Infrastructure Australia and Infrastructure New South Wales have already started looking holistically across projects to understand how to address these market challenges with resources and supplies. So some of our initial thoughts coming out of the research for industry is that we need to think differently about capturing and sharing lessons out of projects and between projects. And we recognise this is really difficult, but increasingly important given the scale and the speed of development in Australia, and the need to contribute positively to outcomes like we've been discussing: net zero, climate change, wellbeing, and productivity. And to achieve these outcomes, we really need to measure the right things. So removing the emphasis on low cost as a competitive factor in the procurement process, and focusing on what's important to communities and values and outcomes to society. We also need to support our community of project leaders in managing these projects. Look, there needs to be a shift to a systems leadership mindset to see projects in a wider context, and then upskilling to understand when, how much to collaboration is needed. So, you know, our research is echoing many of the fantastic speakers today, and we really see these three emerging insights as essential reforms for delivering infrastructure projects in the future. Thank you.
Lara, thank you very much. That was really interesting. I found it fascinating that knowledge transfer was happening more effectively through informal networking than through contractually mandated means, or through what I imagine is the much slower transfer of individuals from project to project, which is probably more of a ecological generational question rather than something that can benefit a project while it's up and running. But thank you very much for your talk. I'd like to move on to our final presentation for this set of 6. I'd like to introduce Professor Geoffrey Shen from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, who will be looking at sustainability in major projects. Geoffrey, over to you.
Thank you, Julien. Good morning, everyone. I'm calling from Hong Kong, so this is 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, I'd like to start by thanking Professor Jennifer White for her kind invitation to join this forum. As some of you know, my research interest has been stakeholder analysis, stakeholder management, etc. And a few years ago, we got the opportunity to look into this issue of cross-regional cooperation in the construction industry. And we became fascinated about the challenges and opportunities in this area. So this is what I'm going to share with you today. Next, please. Let me give you a brief introduction to this concept of the Greater Bay Area. Now, the Bay Area we refer to is the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area. It covers Hong Kong, Macau, and other 9 cities in Guangdong province. Altogether, it covers an area of 56,000 square kilometers and population 86 million. And the GDP in this area is about almost $2 trillion US. The GBA plays a significant role in the national development and regional integration. The map on the right shows all these different cities in this Greater Bay Area. Next, please. In the construction industry, as we all know, construction industry played a very important role in the national development. And there are additional challenges and complexities in this cross-regional collaboration. So the context here is we have one country, 2 systems, and 3 jurisdictions. So on top of all these complexities in the construction industry, all these different cities, different regions, have their own policies, regulations, design standards and code, etc. And as a result, although the market is interconnected, but there are still restrictions in terms of resources flow. For example, whether the talents in Hong Kong can work in other cities in this Greater Bay Area and vice versa. So because of this complex nature, the original complex, multi-layered, self-organized, and polycentric nature of project cooperation become more complex. So it is essential to formulate a policy framework for these cross-regional cooperation strategies in the construction industry in the GBA area to capitalize on the diverse strengths of each region and enhance the cooperative mechanisms and systems. Next, please. So after we have conducted literature review, we have identified 3 specific areas for cooperation, namely talents. I mentioned early on whether the construction professionals or construction enterprises in one place can work in other places. So this is talents, and also the project management cooperation. There are different project management mode, approaches, and whether these different approaches can be shared in other places to get a real benefit. And the regulations, there are different regulations, design standard, etc. So how do we enable the cooperation in this regard? And of these different areas mentioned or heavily emphasized in the 14th five-year plan of the National Economic Social Development, in the outline development plan, etc., etc. Next, please. About 4 years ago, we got the opportunity to work on this Shenzhen-Hong Kong cooperation in the construction sector and innovation on institutions and mechanisms. We were approached by the Shanghai Authority in Shenzhen. This is one of the cities in the Greater Bay Area. So when they approach us, they look into specifically between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, in particular in the Shanghai area, which is one of the area earmarked for special experiment of new ideas, innovative solutions, etc. So we have approached different stakeholders in the 2 cities, including the government, the professional institutions, and many other key players through interviews, focus group meetings, and case studies, etc. So among other deliverables and findings of the project, one thing we feel very proud of is we come out with a policy in 2 areas. One is, as you can see here, methods for the administration of the filing of construction professionals. And the other one is methods for the administration of the filing of professional institutions. So basically, these 2 documents, as you can see on the top right-hand side in Chinese, which actually opened the door for Hong Kong's construction professionals and professional institutions to go across the border to work in Shenzhen. And this particular policy, of course, it has gone through a lot of revisions, etc. It actually enabled so far 51 professional organizations and 470 professional individuals to work in the Shanghai Authority in Shenzhen across the border from Hong Kong. And also we have, in this project, we have also introduced other possible area for deepening the collaboration in terms of improvement of and optimization of construction project approval and supervision systems. For example, One thing we have in Hong Kong is called the authorized person, and whether this particular mechanism can be introduced to Shenzhen and other cities in the Greater Bay Area. And other things like Hong Kong's standard, whether it can be adopted in some pilot project in Shenzhen and in other cities. In the lower left bottom, you can see this is one of the focus group meetings we have conducted with about 40 different stakeholders in the government, in the professional institutions, etc. We also won the RICS Research Award of the Year last year because of this project. Next, please. Now, as a result of this project for Qianhai Authority, we are now moving to the next stage. We try to look into maybe a bigger scale of the project, to look into whether we can design and optimize a policy framework for the cross-regional collaboration. And it involves the three areas I mentioned earlier: talent cooperation, project management cooperation, and regulation cooperation. So we are very much looking forward to collaborate with some of you if you are also interested in this cross-regional or cross-border collaboration, whether you are in Europe or whether you are in Australia, New Zealand. There may be similar issues. Okay, so next, please. This is my contact. Looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you for a fascinating presentation. That was really interesting. Geoffrey, if I'd like to ask you a question, or first, if I can congratulate you first on your RICS award. The achievement of creating measures for the administration of filing of construction professionals and professional institutions seems like a major achievement. Can you talk through some of the complexities in getting to these documents that people were happy to walk away with?
Right. Thank you so much. Now, it's a long story. Okay. Now, although Hong Kong and Shenzhen is very close, just separated by one river, you can go from one city to another city within just, a few minutes, a couple of minutes. But because of the complexity I mentioned early on, this is one country, two systems, and three different jurisdictions. So historically, there are restrictions for Hong Kong construction professionals, just to use this as an example, to work in Shenzhen. One thing we have done, if you allow the construction professionals and the professional institution to work in Shenzhen, because they are qualification requirements, so you have to do a lot of matching. Say, what is your qualification in Hong Kong? What kind of project you are allowed to do? And then we can match the qualification requirement in mainland China, then to see, okay, these two are equivalent. So what you can do here, you can do there. And similarly, like the professional individuals, like architects, engineers, surveyors, etc. So they are different qualification systems. So what you can possibly do here, how you can actually work in the similar area in another city. So this is very tedious work, and it involves a huge amount of comparative studies, and also involve legislation. So you have to go through the People's Congress in Shenzhen city to pass the bill. So it is we have spent a lot of time on this project. There are a lot of tears, but also joys as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll unmute myself. Thank you very much. And Žiga, could I pass one question to you in the final minutes that we have? The questions that you're raising of analytic versus generative AI, I thought were particularly fascinating. I was wondering, and also the point that you raised about the different requirements for use of AI in art or poetry versus something like engineering design. To what extent do you think there is a fundamental difference in these application areas compared to it being a matter of how the amount that AI has been applied to these different areas? So for instance, language generation models have been a popular area of application for AI, largely motivated by things like the desire to pass the Turing test. Could you respond to that point?
Yeah, what we have seen from the AI and what is somehow the essence of it is at least the neural network approach, which somehow is steamrolling over all the other technologies, is it's actually very good at recognizing patterns, which is easy, which is the analytical part. And what it became good at in the last couple of years is continuing patterns. So you write a prompt and it's able to continue that pattern. It's able to generate on top of that. And we have seen, or what we are seeing, is solutions that give you like one answer, right? They give you a paragraph of text or something similar. Then you have to come in, ask it some more, ask it some more. So it's unable to work like engineers and architects work, doing loops, testing it again, retrying, tracing back, going back, and so on and so forth. And that's why I think that we will be seeing a lot of the use of this type of AI to get us some initial prompts, to get us some initial ideas. But then the engineer will have to do and control all these iterative steps through which our work goes. So I was showing you that shading system. AI is very good at creating kind of, first idea, which may or may not work, which is difficult to create in a structured way. But then you translate that into a structured definition, into symbolic definition, into a computable model, and then you generate and test those models to go further. So this is, I think, where if you are writing a report and you need a paragraph of literature study, it works very well because it spits it out. But when we design engineering stuff, we do something, we go back, we do loops, we do iterations, we structure it hierarchically, etc., etc. And it will be sometime when AI it will pass sometime. I think theoretically it seems very incapable of doing that. It seems very able to simulate that, to give an impression that it understands. But yet it is kind of void in the inside. So
we don't have long, but I would like to raise a question for Lara. So to what extent do you think there are opportunities to formalize the project management, the mega project ecology? Are there ways that we can more effectively share expertise, share capability, and develop our I guess, societal capability more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And that's, I suppose, where we hope to get to at the end of this, because they're definitely, it was a very polarizing topic when people would ask you. They would either say, oh, it doesn't happen at all, we don't share anything, or, they would explore some of these ideas. I think it would be really nice to kind of capture in a more formal way some of the lessons coming out of these projects that are finishing up, like the Crossrail Learning Legacy. Who funds these kind of activities is always a tricky thing, but I really think that we don't want to lose that knowledge, and that knowledge is living in a lot of people at the moment. And hopefully, if it is kind of put in a more kind of formalized way like that it could be used in energy sector projects, for example, which is the next obviously big thing that we've been talking about this morning. You know, and I think we do a really great job of sharing technical knowledge, like you know, the learned societies, you know, this technical knowledge seems to happen at that level, but maybe not so much about leadership at that higher level. So, you know, that's something that we need to kind of think about within maybe some of these organizations, consulting firms, construction, and within government, how we might capture that kind of knowledge as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And cycling back to our first presenter, Paolo, if there were one or two key points that we can take away from the Opera House experience, what would they be? Sorry, you're muted.
Yes, I'm muted. Yeah, the Opera House, it's kind of paradigmatic in this sense, because it really shows us, you know, that, you know, we need knowledge, we need people that have some will to build as well, things, something like that, complex stuff, complex projects, and also, of course, the degree of integration is that was developed for that project was extremely like deep and complex, and it relies on a lot of individuals, but at the same time also relies on the knowledge that was developed somehow in building the infrastructures for Australia, so bridges, and then knowledge was eventually transferred into the construction of the Sydney Opera House. Without that knowledge, we wouldn't have been able to build the Sydney Opera House. So it's important to build this kind of, you know, bottom-up, even like approach, where you start building and then you develop knowledge, and then knowledge become more and more complex and more defined, and eventually, if you're able to somehow, you know, collect the knowledge and to share the knowledge, eventually we might also improve the AI, product, which I think is really hindered by the fact that we don't have enough knowledge in the space yet. But I think when we're gonna have knowledge, that bulk of knowledge, but it also showed us that it was, I mean, the fact that we were able to collect to tell this story now was based on our like access to the archive, to the material that is very difficult to access in the construction space. So I think this is also another lesson. We need access to that material if we want to start, you know, building that collection and bulk of knowledge that can help us to develop and to build more intelligently, if you like. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that's really interesting, because it is the access to knowledge which forms the basis for a lot of our analytic and generative AI systems, but is also the fundamental basis for the interpersonal knowledge transfer, yeah. Both of which I think are key themes which have been coming through in this set of 6 excellent presentations. So I'd like to thank our 6 presenters, Paolo, Neda, Natalie, Žiga, Lara, and Geoffrey. I wish we could have had more time to talk, but sometimes short and sweet is very effective as well.